Hi, good morning, everyone. Good
Morning,
morning
Miss
to
Kay.
everyone at the Zoom room. Good morning, sir, and everyone watching as well in the Facebook live stream. I want to start by saying thank you to CEM for this opportunity not to be part of this conference. Happy anniversary, 40 plus years. No, that's really, really amazing. And it's really great work that it's part of helping people transition into this crazy, crazy time that we are in now. I'm always excited whenever I'm asked to talk about well being, mental health, and adjustment. I think of it as not a training that involves a lot of theories. Maybe you can think of this learning session as more like a wellness investment, more like this is your time no, to ask yourself how you are. What are the things that maybe we could check in terms of our strengths and our vulnerabilities as we proceed forward, pandemic or not, no? And this is something that I'm personally passionate about. I always start my conferences by saying I'm wearing two hats whenever I talk to people. I have the hat of a psychologist, but I'm also a person who has been previously diagnosed with a mood condition. So I am a person with bipolar disorder. And I always start it that way by sharing that because I want people to understand that there's really no shame when you talk about well being and when you talk about something that is possibly genetic no, and chronic and experienced by a lot of people. This is something that we should break the stigma about. Now, so to formally start, no, when we talk about ensuring well-being in a digital learning platform, I want to focus on two things. And the title that we have today is Promoting Mental Health and Psychological Safety. And what are the opportunities that we have as well-being advocates, but also the challenges we might experience as we transition these programs into a digital platform. These two concepts are very, very important to learning. We do know no, with the increased focus on mental health that mental health has a direct relationship with academic standing. We know that persons who experience more positive emotions are more open to learning, they're more creative, they're less likely to engage in problem behaviors that might interfere with their processing of the information and the activities that are presented in class. But as important is psychological safety, and this may be a new term for the academe, but it's something corporations, for example, have been touting for a long time. And it's really that sense that when you are in a situation like a classroom, whether virtual or face to face, you feel that it's okay to make mistakes. You feel that nothing that you say will be taken against you. It's not going to be posted elsewhere for discussion. It's not going to be something that would be subject to ridicule. And with that kind of safety, the sense that it's okay to just be myself, have at it at my own pace of learning, maybe talk about if I'm struggling a bit, whether emotionally or with the academic material. When there is such a safety, then the group is more engaged and more productive at the end of the day. And so these are the things that I feel are very important to focus on. Um, but maybe to start po, no, just so we have the same atmosphere and like the same state of mind before we begin. I want to engage you into a simple activity. And what I'm going to do is I'll present to you three statements. Okay, and all you need to do is, whether you're watching from Facebook or you're in the Zoom room, is just repeat the statements and then try it on for size, like see if it rings true for you. And if not, that's also okay. No, it doesn't, you don't have to resonate with it, but you can just think about it and reflect if these are things that ring true for you. But these are concepts that come from a idea called radical acceptance, now from a therapeutic technique. And I think this could summarize a lot of the well-being struggles that we are experiencing right now. Radical acceptance is this idea wherein there are things in our life that we wouldn't choose. If we have an opportunity, if we have just the ability to choose, no, nobody would ask for a situation like the one that we are in, where there's a lot of disruption and there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of limited resources going about, plus a lot of work, no, that we need to do. And we don't want it, but somehow no, being stuck in the idea na bakit kasi nangyari to, no? Sana hindi na lang kasi nag-pandemic pa, kasi nag-digital learning pa, and things like that, no? The more we get stuck into that concept, the slower we could be in really adjusting and maybe seeing opportunities and thriving in a situation that's unfamiliar to us. And this is the struggle of teachers, this is the struggle of parents, this is the struggle of students. Now, it's really adjusting and finding a way to embrace, diba? Sometimes with stress and hesitation at first, but eventually, like having a good learning curve in understanding all of these changes. And the concepts relate to number one, no, right here is where I'm supposed to be. Maybe mindfulness, that there's a lot on our to-do list. There's now more to do. There's now more pressure. There's now more, I don't know if you agree with me, but online learning and online platforms are seem to be harder and more work, no, than teaching face to face, no. So, but despite all of that to-do list, maybe just the mindfulness and also not worrying about anxieties that we have for possible infection as we do our tasks, no, we could compartmentalize that and attend to it in a more limited fashion so that it doesn't interfere with our day. But also, though, this idea that what we have in this moment is really what we have control over. What the pandemic took from us is really control, because now we can no longer decide where to go, who to hug, how to spend our time. We may have plans that are now suddenly parang cut short. I have friends who own schools, for example, who are part of institutions that have to close down or downsize. And it's really a challenging time. And those are things we don't have control over. And the onus on us, now the premium is to focus on what we can control and what we can recover in terms of empowerment. And that's what we do in the current moment. That's how we spend our day. That's how we interact with our students. This is basically what we have control over right now. And yes, no, the last one is about transcendence. That maybe no, we wouldn't choose this. It's not perfect, but maybe it could be in its own way, something that's right and appropriate. If we maybe see the meaning in it and the value and the transcendence, even I would say the spirituality of dealing with something like this, a crisis like this. And those are aspects that affect our well-being or our mental health as we move forward. What are we going to do for this 1 hour and a half that we will be together? First, we would like to enumerate the importance of maintaining a positive learning environment for educators and students. And we'll talk about, yes, mental health and psychological safety in relation to those. We would share with you some checklists or guidelines on how to check in if our students or even our co-faculty members are experiencing mental and emotional distress. But also, we would discuss in a digital platform what may contribute to these experiences of psychological distress that all in the school community are experiencing. Okay, so before we start, I want to level everyone off of what is mental health or emotional and mental well-being. And I know that for most schools, they have started a mental health literacy campaign already. And some of you here are practicing guidance counselors also, and this is familiar to you. But I want to stress certain points just so we have the same framework as we move forward discussing how to provide mental health support services to our group. Now, when we define mental health, we always go by the WHO or the World Health Organization definition. And it says here now that mental health is a state in which 1, individuals realize their potentials, 2, can cope with the normal stresses of life, 3, can work productively and fruitfully, and 4, can contribute to the community. So the first emphasis that I want to do is, if you notice, nothing in this definition mentions illness. No, it doesn't mention depression. It doesn't mention anxiety. And this is very important because mental health is more than the absence of mental illness. I like to use the analogy of physical health. No? Some of us, we may have to go routinely for laboratories to check our vitals. So for some of us, we have to go for our lipid profiles, no, our blood sugar, our uric acid, if you can relate. Um, it doesn't follow that a person who is clear on all of those measures in the laboratory automatically has optimum physical health. Because what if walking through 2 flights of stairs, no, hinihingal na sila. So, hindi na maximize yung potential ng physical health nila. What if they are immunocompromised from stress, no, not for from an underlying condition? So, hindi na ma-maximize the immunity that their physical well-being can provide them. It's the same with mental health. So just because a person does not have a diagnosable mental health concern doesn't mean that they have maximized their emotional and mental well-being. Because if you look at the definition of mental health is one, realizing your potentials. I don't know if you remember now from the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like what's on the top. Do we know? Like maybe you can share in the chat box for those in the Zoom room. So physical needs, no, security, like what's really on top. Do we remember? Opo, ayan, no? So Nariel said self-actualization. And I have a definition of self-actualization that I think is practical but very, very interesting to reflect on. Self-actualization is, thank you to everyone who's also remembering that topmost part of the pyramid. Self-actualization is no matter what you're doing, no matter where you are, you know you're exactly where you should be, doing what you should be doing. It's kind of like a sense of congruence between your values and your vision for yourself and what are the demands in your life with what's actually happening. And it doesn't mean that everything is going okay. There could be problems and there would be problems, but it's really a sense that everything is still aligned with everything that you want and envision and what's optimal for your growth. And that's mental health, and that's a challenge for us and an opportunity in this pandemic because there is no better opportunity to teach about resilience, to teach about striving for what's a quality life as defined by the student or the teacher or even the school administration and really pursue that. Mental health is also being able to cope with the normal stresses of life. So do you have stress? I always like to ask this now. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most stress, how would you rate your current stress level? Ang bilis ni Sir Mark. Okay, 10. Okay, Dexter said 6. No, 8, 7, 4, 9, 8. Okay, very, very quick. Yeah, no, and we all have stress. So if you answered that you have stress, can you like tap your shoulder and say congratulations? Congratulations, you have stress. And why do I say that? No, a person with mental health is not a person who's stress-free. There's no such stress level now. Sabi ni Ma'am Lovely, 8. Okay. Stress is not a absence. No? It's not something that would be absent in life. It's actually even a normal part of life because it's simply your body's way of telling you that your resources for coping with a situation is getting depleted. And there's a demand that's being asked in your body from things that are happening outside or in your mind, the things that you're thinking. And you may need to rest and replenish. And so the only person without stress is, those who are already 6 feet under. By virtue of being alive and you have deliverables and you're working with people with different personalities, you would have stress. So our goal is not to remove stress, but to increase stress resilience. But I did highlight their normal in the definition because mental health is about being able to cope with normal amounts of stress. What we are experiencing in this pandemic, especially around March, April, when it's all very new, is something extraordinary already. In fact, some pundits are even saying that this is akin to World War II. This is akin to a experience of a war, but the enemy is something that we cannot see. And the amount of disruption and the things that we have to adapt to are really, really intense. And it could create compounding stress. And the important thing to remember about that is if you are not okay at this particular time, if you're feeling you're not as productive as you used to be, if you're overwhelmed at times, that's actually okay. Some people are already diagnosing themselves with depression or anxiety disorders just because they're not doing well at this particular time. But it may not necessarily be so. It could be that the stressors are just too much compared to the situation. In fact, there are even people asking me, Ma'am Kay, 6 months na, shouldn't I be okay already? Kind of depends, no? It kind of depends on whether the stressors you're experiencing are still persisting. And they are for some people. Some have spouses who still do not have job security. Their companies could fold up anytime. Some people, of course, there's the virus still, and we are going out. We need to do our necessities. It's still there. So some level of not being okay is kind of expected. And we have to translate this message of normalizing the stress even to our students. I think that's the first part of ensuring well-being in this difficult time. No, not necessarily digital, but with the pandemic. Um, we have to tell people that it's okay to not be okay. No, it's a cliche, it's a Korean novella, but that's really the truth of it, because of the situation that we are in. And the extension of that is extending compassion for the limitations of everyone as they adjust to this platform, to the digital learning experience. So we don't know what people are going through. I think this is the main message that we have to remember. We don't know what our students are experiencing, what their families are experiencing, what the teachers are experiencing. In this pandemic, I have talked, for example, to people who, a pregnant mother, for example, taking care of her young kids, but the spouse has been locally stranded all of this time. I have talked to a person whose family members have been in succession diagnosed positive with COVID. I have talked to a family who live in a one-room condominium unit, and there are two work-from-home parents, and then three children having to study from home, and one very, very bad internet connection, and just one wonky laptop device. There is really, 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 really a lot of context that we don't understand in what we co-teachers and students are experiencing. And that sense of compassion is very critical as we understand what needs to happen. But yes, no, our focus is to help people adjust, to be more productive, and to contribute and understand that we are a learning community and we could take care of each other. Yeah, no, there was someone who said privately, you're right in saying that we don't know what people are feeling, and that's why we appreciate anything that they share to us. That's a very nice insight. So when people are starting to disclose to you what is happening in their lives, it's really a sacred moment, because that's an expression of trust that they are sharing with you all of these things. And so I'll not go into all of this, but we do know that there are compounding stressors as people transition to a digital learning experience and the new normal in general. So there's health and risk of infection, limited financial security. For children, the home is not conducive to learning. There's very bad internet connection. There's probably sickness and death in the family. Limited mobility, especially for children who are very much into their peer groups, no, is very, very high stressor. Of course, they miss their friends, they miss going out, and they miss the old way of doing things where there's, I suppose, no, a relaxation time in between classes, that they could just chat or go to the grounds so that they could spend time and socialize. So how do we provide these services, this emotional and mental support to our students? I'm going to say, let's start with us, the teachers, and the guidance counselors and the school administrators. It's a cliche, but you really cannot give what you do not have. So it's always starting with ensuring that we ourselves are in a good state of mental health. And I want to express this now by sharing with it as mental health being on a spectrum. Because a lot of people have the misconception that mental health is binary, meaning you're either mentally well or you're not mentally well. So we classify people and we judge people, and consequently, we're hard on ourselves when we think we're going into the more unwell bit. Um, but mental health is a spectrum, so you can think of it more like as a ruler, wherein at various points of your life, because of different changes in you developmentally and changes happening in the world outside and in the larger social context of the government and the world situation, you would swing a little to the left sometimes and a little to the right. Depression, for example, no studies show that on the average, a person can undergo depression as much as 3 times within their lifetime. So that tells you, no, that you may have moments where you're okay and you have moments where you're not okay. And what's more important is this constant self-awareness of checking in with yourself, quieting down, and ensuring that you are in a good place. And if you look at it now, I'll just go through it very, very quickly. Um, you can be in the green zone of the spectrum, meaning that you are in the healthy mental health side of the spectrum. So in the healthy, you have normal mood fluctuations. So it doesn't mean that just because you're sad sometimes, you're anxious sometimes, you are already experiencing a mental health problem. These fluctuations are congruent reactions to what is happening outside. And for as long as they don't stay with you for most of the week, for example, and you can do things that would lift your mood into a more positive state, as you recognize what's happening, you're still in the healthy side of the spectrum. So you're performing well, you're in control mentally, you're also physically well, you have few sleep issues. When I say sleep difficulties, it could be that you have short sleep, you don't get enough, or you sleep as much as 8 hours a day, but so for sleep problems are, you can sleep as much as 8 hours a day, but you don't feel rested when you wake up. That could be an indicator of stress also. You're physically and socially active. There's an interest to move. No, you're not lethargic. There's an interest to connect, even on an online platform. And you're not using substances or gambling to cope. Basically, there's very little diversionary tactics that are potentially addictive. Ayan. O may nagsishare, no, sleep difficulty, 3 hours lang dahil sa stress. And yeah, no, we know sleep affects everything. Affects your mood, no? Affects your immunity, affects your concentration. So it's really a very pervasive thing if we have sleep difficulties. Now, as the stressors come, no, we may move a bit to the right. We may go a little to the responding or reacting side of the spectrum. And this is when we are experiencing stress, but maybe it's not noticeable by everyone. But you have spots. Like you have moments where you can really tell that you are getting affected already and your energy is getting utilized. And when you're in the responding, reacting stage, you have moments when you're irritable. You have moments when it's more often than not you're nervous. More often than not, you're sad and overwhelmed. You may be forgetful, trouble sleeping. You're starting to have intrusive thoughts or even obsessions. This is what's linked to the difficulty sleeping sometimes because we overthink when we are stressed, low energy. Ayan na po yung mga masasakit, no? Muscle tensions, headaches. Ano po bang masakit pag you're stressed? Masakit ang ulo, no? Masakit ang balikat, no? Masakit ang likod. Decreased activity and socializing, and maybe regular but controlled substance use or gambling. Now, whenever you see yourself like moving towards the yellow zone, this is a signal for self-help. This is a signal that maybe you have to stop what you're doing for a bit and employ a stress management strategy. Maybe it's a signal that you may have to put some distance between you and the stressor if that's possible, or rethink reframe your thinking to the stressor. But self-help is very important, and self-help has to be scheduled. It should not be, I will rest when I have time to rest. Di pa ako tapos eh. It's like financial literacy, no? You save first before you think about your would-be expenses. In mental health, you plan your stress management first, your wellness first. And you can do this as a school community, as a faculty community. Um, you plan that, integrate that in your day, in your school program, and then have it as soon as possible so that there could be more preventive programs for it escalating to the orange and red zone. So orange zone is you're struggling, and injured and struggling means the impact of the stress on you is very noticeable, because your functionality is already affected. So you may have negative attitude, anxiety, poor performance, poor concentration, restless, disturbed sleep. Ayan na, may mga nag-share in their school, they have kamustahan, non-judgmental space for student to lessen academic stress. Very, very good. Ayan, and people are sharing where they are. No? Avoidance, withdrawal, increased substance use, and gambling that's hard to control. And when all of your resources to cope has been utilized, you may go into a crisis. And a crisis means the stressor is too much compared to our capacity to cope. Of angry outbursts, aggression, excessive anxiety, panic attacks, suicide ideation, can't perform duties, can't fall asleep or stay asleep, sleeping too much or too little, constant fatigue, not going out, substance gambling, addiction, and other addictions is very difficult to control. Okay, for these two, orange and red, it may be difficult to manage it by self-help alone. And this could be a time to seek for loved ones, friends, to talk to and ventilate and ask help from, and even maybe a professional mental health consultant, so that you could be assisted to go back a bit to the left, so that you could manage the stress. Yeah, Gemma said the best stress remedy is to slow down, love yourself, and pray more. I do agree. I want to share now about frameworks for how we could promote mental health in the school setting. And this is an old framework, wherein it's a WHO model for school mental health promotion. It's quite old, it's 1994, but what I really like about it is it has programs that are preventive, protective in nature, it has early intervention, and it has therapeutic intervention. And this is, I think, the model that all schools should have in promoting mental health and well-being. And what we'll do is we'll discuss it in normal context, and then we'll discuss it, how to translate it in a digital learning experience. But how does the WHO model work? If you see on the right, the programs that you should create is categorized in 3 sections. It has to be, there are programs that are support for all. Support for all means it's designed for the general population, for the whole school community. So all students, all teachers, all non-teaching personnel, all school administration, there are programs that supports everyone. Support for some is support that is given to maybe 20 or 30% of the student or faculty population that may need extra support because they have identified vulnerabilities. And who the vulnerable ones are in a community would have to depend on your assessment and survey or screening, temperature checks that may be constant. But when we identify people who have the potential to struggle, we do early intervention programs so that we can prevent those from happening. And support for a few is for the 3 to 12% of the population that may need professional intervention because their concerns are more maybe clinical in nature or requires a specialist support. And that means that the school may have to network with external providers for these specialized services. But let's look at how it looks like. Interestingly, the bulk, the largest part of this inverted pyramid is environment. The first part of mental health promotion in schools is actually creating environments which promote mental and emotional well-being and positive social interactions. I've seen schools who are gung-ho at creating programs, but before programs, it's really environment. And in the old setup prior to the pandemic, when we say environment, it's something as simple as Are the furniture in good condition? Is the are there decorations that make the place welcoming, warm, no, to the persons who are in there? Is the general ethos or atmosphere of everyone there also welcoming? No, are there people saying good morning? Are people smiling? Is it more relaxed, or are people more they act like they're under threat or something like that? No? Is there that sense of safety? And even, are there places, right? Or is the setup of the classroom arranged in such a way that people could connect? You know, it's good for social interactions. Like the seats are not too far apart, or there are places, there are grounds wherein students can congregate and get to know one another and socialize. That is a good start for promoting mental health already. Now, the challenge there is, how do you translate that in a digital platform? Because environment now is not the facility and not the classroom, the furniture, because there's no such furniture. Now it's important to think of environment as the learning community. So how do we create a learning community that has that ethos, wherein everybody is free to share what they are going through? It doesn't have to be processed. It's just being authentic. They don't have to exert the effort to hide and put up a brave front as they interact with other students. Is it a learning community that has opportunities for support? So yung grounds, no, or yung water cooler kung saan tayo nagchichismisan in a physical classroom, how do you create those spots in an online platform? Where can they go? Is there a breakout group, or an e-group, or a platform, a chat box, a safe space in the internet where they could have that social interaction, so that they could have that peer communication that they also need in this difficult time? And environment in a digital classroom is also the learning management system. Is it easy to use? Is it responsive to the profile of your students? Nakaka-stress po, no? Like, ewan ko, no, if it's just me, pero I'm not a digital native. I could still remember typing my assignments on a typewriter. And some programs, no, some modalities would really take a while to get used to. And environment is that. If it's too complicated, the way we have to submit assignments, get homeworks, interact with friends, that's also affecting mental health, because that's a cost of stress. That's techno stress. Something even as simple as, is one teacher using Viber, the other teacher is using Facebook chat, is the other teacher using WhatsApp, is the other teacher using a Zoom chat, is the other teacher. If you have a student who has to respond to different platforms, that's actually digital stress also, because there's like invasion of data and communication from various apps, and that may be too much apps for a student to handle. So that's environment. Before programs, you have to think about, how do we ensure that this environment is not adding to the stress of the students? So yeah, no, something as simple as, do we structure when we give our homeworks, so that that the clients, the parents, and the children can protect their work-life balance? Something as simple like that is protective of mental health already. Now, also part of support for all is mental health education, knowledge, attitude, and behavior. And these are the literacy part of our mental health support. And the best practice really is to make this part of the general curriculum, meaning it's integrated in the classroom setup, that we will teach about mental health. And my suggestion is, please focus as much on preventive and protective factors, increasing resilience, as much as we are focusing on what are the disorders or the maladjustments to look for. for example, no, some people, what they're doing is like the traditional homeroom class can be an opportunity to discuss about coping. And the discussion has to be as group-centered as possible, so they have an opportunity to share what they are experiencing. And I also suggest that maybe what we can do is to make it more a consistent thing rather than a one-time thing. Because I do know and I applaud no, that there are mental health literacy webinars for students right now. It's a really good idea. It's way more than what we had before, and it's very helpful for a lot of people. But one webinar for a school year may not be sufficient to create a culture. So what I do suggest is you can select very, very simple concepts to focus consistently per month. It doesn't have to be that we teach them everything. For example, for the month of October, maybe we could just discuss the concept of people will not judge you if you ask. Generally, people will not judge you if you ask for help. That it's okay to ask for help. Just that one concept. And what's nice about digital learning is maybe the guidance team or the advisor can more easily now flip into rooms, into classrooms more than before. We don't have to, we don't have to go to the next building to talk to them. And maybe for something as short as 5 or 10 minutes, we can illustrate the concept by sharing. You know what? We made a survey. We asked everyone if you have a friend who is experiencing anxiety because her parents are experiencing marital conflict. What would you tell that person? Would you think more negatively of that person because they ask help for what they're going through? And just share with them. Oh, did you know that 97% of the students here said they will not judge you for sharing something like that? And we just want to say, it's okay to ask for help. And that's just the concept. And that can be reinforced by infographics that you send in your Facebook page, in their Viber groups, or even emails with the addendum of the services that they can go to if they need more specialized support. No? So Ma'am Jacqueline said they integrate social emotional learning in their homeroom class. Yeah, teaching people how to handle emotions. Something as simple as having a emotional thermometer. In the physical classroom, we do recommend na there's like a emotional thermometer sa dingding ng mga elementary preschool students, and they just can log how they're feeling today, and we don't have to process it. And the idea kasi is everyone has a right to what they're feeling, and what they're feeling is not necessarily something to be processed. It could be, but not necessarily. Sometimes people just want that comfort level of being able to share. Now, how do you create that culture? I suppose it starts with the teachers being comfortable themselves, sharing about something that they are experiencing. I still have that discussion wherein some teachers feel, ayokong umiyak kaya in front of my students. I don't want to share about my stress kasi they might perceive that I'm weak. But it's not necessarily so, no? I think it's like giving them permission to do the same. It's modeling for them how to handle emotions for as long as when you communicate, you are communicating your proactive ways to cope. Hindi ka naman, you're sharing your stressors and you're sharing how overwhelming and then it's done. Like you can share, I'm feeling sad today because this is what's happening. But this is what I'm going to do. No? And they can do that even if somehow some faculty have Facebook accounts that are exclusive for students. That's a good modeling also if they can share with that. So from Bacolod, Ma'am Cinderella said, they discuss topics like handling emotional triggers, delaying gratification, accepting responsibility. Very good, no? These are very important things to add in the general curriculum. It's also and I'll share that later. It's very important that faculty members also go the extra mile of projecting a atmosphere where people could approach them for concerns, and it's a very positive atmosphere. But yes, no, for 20 to 30% for students, you may have to do targeted early intervention programs. And who are the students who may need additional help at school? You could survey that. You could measure stress levels, depression level. If there are reported depression in your guidance office, who typically are these people? Like, are these people with children of single parents? That might be a risk factor. Children who have poor social skills, children who have social anxiety as they transition to digital platform, and how do we create specialized programs for them. So I think the challenge here is, how do we get information that people are still okay when we are in our respective homes? And my thought about that is, in a digital platform, you may have to capitalize on all sources of referrals and information as much as you can. Do encourage parents to tell you if their child is not okay, because they will now, that is sinasabi natin, oh, teachers, you see your students more times of the day than the parents, so you're the frontliner in their well-being. Now it's different. No, you see them also in class, but you see like this part, no, upper body, but you don't see everything else. You don't see them interact with others or do their self-paced homework. So this may be a time to ramp up that partnership with the home, so that parents can tell you, give you information if they're okay, and partnership with the peer groups, no, so that they can share if their friends are not okay. Partnerships with even extracurricular facilitators would be very, very helpful. So we see things like that. I look at the questions later. We do have to have early interventions programs. I've seen an organization, what they do is they really email on a consistent basis, like the schedules available for screening. For example, the guidance office is open to anyone who would like to be screened if they have mental health concern, and these are the schedules. I do realize that young people are more comfortable sharing in chat. I don't know if you want to rethink whether or not one-on-one counseling or one-on-one screening is as effective. It can be, it's the ideal, but young people, Filipinos in general, sometimes they just want a chat intervention. So you can think of it that way in terms of getting that data as who are for candidates for early intervention. But the last is, a good school program has to have programs for some or for few. And these are for students needing additional mental health services or professional intervention. So you have now the children who have been diagnosed with clinical depression, anxiety, maybe learning disabilities, individual intellectual concerns. And the key here are two things, I think. So linkages with professionals who could provide that service. If you don't have a specialist inside your school, some schools could afford to, but also training the school to provide what's called a reasonable accommodation. A reasonable accommodation is any adjustment you provide in the learning situation that will help a student experiencing mental health struggles to perform the task in spite of any disability caused by the mental health condition. And I think not all schools are as open or as equipped in providing that accommodation. I'll give you an example. I have clients with social anxiety, and their response to digital learning is variable. Some thrive more because they don't have more social interface, but others are struggling more because, in a video platform, kasi in a classroom, you can duck your head and you're not noticed. The video is there, you can be seen, right? And so they're very much conscious, and sometimes I have to write the schools, can you provide an accommodation wherein please just allow the student to not show their face if they want to. Please just allow the student to not recite if they're not comfortable. And variable yung response kasi there are still people who would say, but that's unfair. I won't know what they're doing. They could be going to the bathroom. And that really is sad, because this little accommodation can mean a lot in the recovery of this person, and we have to provide that, no? And there has to be a system for schools to provide such an accommodation. So yeah, no, this is our challenge. That's the format. How do you adapt it in the digital learning experience? I want to spend the rest of my time sharing with you a little bit of tips on how we go about it, ensuring and supporting well-being and safety in the digital class. I think the start also, so we do have our self-care, we have to make sure we're in a good state of mental health as much as we can. But the empathy also for our students is very important. So I think, as mentioned, no, students' lack of technical expertise, unmet needs for human contact, especially because of isolation and because of the quarantine, lack of self-motivation. I think it's covered in previous modules in this conference that what's different in the digital platform is people who have good emotional intelligence and self-regulation and self-discipline do better because it's self-paced, no, most of the time. So if they can't motivate themselves, they would have difficulty adjusting, or they can feel isolated because of the platform that we have. And so we have to appreciate where they are coming from. And you may think of something like this, no? Allowing them to not use cameras for, again, social anxiety or just simply internet connectivity issues. Before we judge that this student is doing something else, we have to consider that baka nagsistruggle siya to connect to the internet. For college students or grad school students, no, they would say, I can't submit my work on time, my paper on time, because I don't have daycare. I have children to think about, but I don't have someone watching them, which could also be true. Financially, it's difficult to pay for daycare, and because there's a COVID infection, some parents would not want their not stay-at-home caregivers to come to their house because of the risk of infection. So you have now your parents also studying, also taking care of their children, and also working. So can that be a valid excuse? Can we say that's fair to give that extension? And that's part of mental health and well-being support. Allowing students to record the digital class is also very important. One, because internet connectivity issues may mean that they will lose some of the material you're discussing if they're lagging in terms of connectivity. But also, it can also mean that they just want to review the material later, and it helps their study. And we may have to get past our issues with being recorded so that we could support something that would be helpful for them in the end. Okay. I want to also share about understanding the limits of text communication and being more mindful of before we judge. I want to share here an actual conversation between me and the Grab delivery driver. So I ordered food to one of our clinic offices, and the Grab driver said, "O, saan po kayo malapit?" So I said, "Pasok lang kayo sa loob ng Paseo," which is where the clinic is located. "Need po exact landmarks," sagot niya. So I texted back, "Dulo po, no, sa tabi sa may Cafe Breton." And then he texted, no, "Location," and exclamation point. And the emotion that I got from there is anger. Sabi ko, "Kuya, ba't galit ka?" But you know what happened was very simple. He shared that one, he just mistyped. Instead of a question mark, no, na-type niya exclamation point. And that already made a difference, no, the typo in how I received the text message. But also, I had the judgment na makulit siya. Kasi sinasagot ko naman yung tanong pa rin siya ng tanong. But actually, for this person, yeah, no, funny, sabi ni Ma'am Hannah. And it was hard to see the humor of it back at the time, pero now, it's quite funny. He was texting. Meron kasi mga tao na pag nag-text sila, they cut a long message. Like, his message pala sa akin was one continuous thread, no? Saan po kayo malapit? Need ko po ng exact landmarks, location, question mark. It's like that, no? One sentence. Pero because he's the type who presses send after every thought, and then I'm quick to answer, I thought I already answered. Nagtatanong pa siya. And that made me have judgments of whether or not this person is courteous or not. And I think this is a good example of how we can mistake text messages if we don't understand the concept or we don't clarify. And this is very important in creating a positive classroom. You understand the limitations of the online platform. Similarly, understand the limitations of reading facial expressions, because like this one, this is not quite an easy facial expression to understand. So baka gina-judge natin, kasi sa video hindi siya nakikinig, mukhang umiirap siya. We don't know because we don't see the context of the child. We don't see what is elsewhere. Baka iniirapan niya kasi yung parents niya is cracking a corny joke outside of your class. It doesn't have to be you. It's just within his earshot. And we have to be careful in making such assumptions. All right. So how do you create more positive classrooms? As I said, no, always accept their emotions and ideas. If they share with you, I'm not enjoying this, mom. I think po masyado pong wordy yung ating talk. We don't have to feel offended. That is simply an expression of what the child feels. So we could accept it. We could just reflect it. We could say, so what I'm hearing from you is that you find the discussion a bit too wordy. Is that right? And thank you for sharing. That's very important. If they share ideas, it's important also to answer in a constructive manner. And not just a constructive manner, but an active constructive manner. One of my favorite programs for positive classrooms is that of the KIP school, wherein they advocate what's called an active constructive responding. And what's active constructive responding? It's saying something positive, pero embellishing it so that it will become a positive connection with the student. So for example, they recited and you like the response. It's not enough to just say, very good. Okay, so next, that's a positive response, but it's passive. You can embellish that, and you can even use your nonverbals to convey it. Yeah, I want to say thank you for that response, because I think that is really what people are experiencing, and you're very empathic, no, for touching on that, and it shows that you care. Something like that, no. And the director of the KIP school has this mandate for his faculty members. You put down 3 coins on the left pocket of your jeans. So this is prior to the pandemic. This is an actual classroom. We can translate it to digital. You put 3 coins in the left pocket of your jeans. Every time you have exerted an effort to do an active constructive response, you transfer 1 coin to the right. You don't go home after the end of the school day without making the day of 3 students in a simple interaction. And you can do it within the class, or you can do it like really selectively saying, can I talk to you for a bit? And you can ask some of your students, could you stay behind for a bit? I just want to affirm something that I saw you did kanina while we were discussing. And and this is what I appreciate. And sabi niya, if you have this amount of faculty members doing this for 3 students a day throughout a whole school year, imagine how much positivity that is at the end of the school year. And that makes the school experience a positive one. So always encourage the learner to further describe and explain what they want to say, so you can understand their points. it's really a time to just say, to ask, where are you coming from? And this is for the academic learning, but also for personal problems. No, don't advise immediately or at all. You can just ask. So I would like to understand where you're coming from. Could you talk to me about it? No. So this is very important. You can do pre-facing responses. No, if you are going to provide a response, always say something positive first, even if your response is a disagreement. Take control of the interaction so that you don't come across as a controlling parent, no? And maybe it's just a good mix of control and nurturing. I had students who shared to me, Ma'am, ang gusto po ng teacher namin, meron kaming 3 device na naka-on kapag kami ay nag-e-exam. So one is the device where they answer the test, another device is in front of them, and another device is at the side. The purpose daw is to stop to see if they're cheating. That's okay. I understand structure and I understand control, but you have to be careful how that's perceived, and whether you're coming across as a warden no, of the digital class, and less of a positive influence to your students. You have to think about that. If there are students who are provocative, diba, ask questions so that you could understand where they're coming from. Use positive language that demonstrates a clear desire to help, and pay attention to the emotional tone of written feedback. So again, don't make assumptions about written feedback because they may not necessarily be antagonistic as you look at the text. Okay, I hope this is so far helping us. Some practical tips also. To create a culture, maybe during class, you can have a how's your day rating in a class discussion. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your day? You don't have to process, you are just doing a wellness check. And then always say, I just want you to know that if you're struggling with anything and you need someone to talk to, we would be happy to talk to you when we can, or refer you to the guidance team, to your class advisor. For any reason, you do not have to hesitate. Respect what they feel, model how you share, and something that I suggest you can do in class are a lot of grounding activities. Grounding activities are activities that would help students manage anxiety and overthinking, which is pretty common right now. Grounding activities can be something as simple as, before you start, do some deep breathing, maybe put your palms on top of the desk where you are, look at 5 things around you, listen to 4 things around you, and maybe just try to quiet down or acknowledge that you have anxieties. And before you start that day, that small meditation can help them be in touch more with the digital class that you're about to give. For supporting well-being, aside from listening with empathy or listening and affirming their emotions, we want to focus on instilling the growth mindset. And what's the growth mindset? It means that you may be struggling right now because the platform is new. But what creates mental health issues is actually when children internalize the struggle as something that's negative about them. Di ba may mga students na kaya they fall into depressive episodes is if they're struggling, they're gonna say, kasi bobo ako kasi mahina ako, ba't hindi ko to makuha? So yun ang kalaban natin actually. That is a risk factor for developing anxiety and depression when you internalize a negative event that's happening. And adjusting to digital class is a stressful event. So what we can do in our communication with them to support their well-being is to help them externalize some of this negative difficulty adjusting. And the way to do that is to talk about not whether they're good or not, or smart or not, but ask them, okay, so you're struggling. How much effort have you exerted? Because sometimes what we need to teach lang is, if we're struggling, we may have to exert more effort. So if you studied for this assignment for 1 hour, maybe you need to do 2 hours the next time. So effort is something workable, and it's not necessarily negative for the person. But sometimes people exert effort, but they're still struggling. So maybe the issue is not just effort, but strategy. So you can ask them, what strategies have you been experiencing? And good mindset and growth mindset interventions can be something as simple as when they say, Mom, I'm not good at this. You just answer, well, you're not good yet. Not yet, not now. But what are the strategies that we can do so you could develop? Because the concept of a growth mindset is that skills can be learned. We just have to exert the effort and give the right environment for it. Even yung sintonado, no? Kasi if you say something like, ako, I'm sintonado, hindi na ako gagaling kumanta. That's a fixed mindset, no? So everyone can learn. You might not be Lani Mesalucha tomorrow, but you will be in tune to a certain extent. So that's the message that we get. So yeah, no, it's difficult now, but maybe we could figure out the strategy. And if they have exerted effort and the strategies are okay, but they're still struggling, maybe what we can teach them is how to proactively ask for help, how to talk to people, performers in class, how to look for resources online, etc., etc. Okay. So that's really about grit, no? But I want you to also mind techno stress. Help our students limit their times on screen, which affects their sleep. Please make sure that you are minding also whether or not it's too much screen time for everyone. Digital safety is also a very important part of navigating technology. So we teach them how to protect their information so that it doesn't have to become viral or any risk for cyberbullying or exploitation. Some tools that you can use, infographics are very helpful, especially for our young persons, because they are digital natives. What I would recommend that you have infographics on is sleep hygiene. Please teach our students how to do sleep hygiene because it's hard in a digital setup because when they know it's self-paced, they can choose to do their homework late in the evening. And studies show that that's really related to mood. You can give them online exercises to follow, like online yoga videos. That could be part of a physical wellness activity. So meron nag-share, sabi ni Ma'am Camila, journaling. Bullet journaling is also very helpful. And there are apps for that. No? Merong gratitude apps, for example, wherein you just have to log in, what do you call this? What you're grateful for today. And if your day is bad, you just have to log in. How come it's not worse? But for apps, you can consider apps like Headspace. Headspace is a meditation app. It has free and paid versions, but the free versions are enough to teach mindfulness, if that would be very helpful. And in having mood journals is also very, very helpful to create wellness. Ayan. Mind your ergonomics when you are in a digital class. So the ideal is you sit in a way that your eyes is about arms away from the screen to protect your eyes. Maybe you can follow the 10-10-10 rule, wherein every 10 minutes you can look at something 10 feet away, maybe for 10 seconds, just to rest your eyes. Kung merong mga plants, look at something alive to rest your eyes. That will help in your physical wellness. Make sure that the positioning of the screen, the laptop, the device is just enough so that the keyboard, you can have a slightly above 45-degree angle on your elbow, hindi siya masyadong mataas, mababa, and you're seated in a chair where you can lean back. Because this is also a cause of stress. And it's very important that we look at that. Now, in case we have identified students who you feel are flagged and could need extra support, you just ask them. You can open the conversation. You can talk to them, maybe ask about their day. When they're comfortable, you can say, you know what, I have noticed that. So I have noticed lately that you're not reciting. I have noticed lately that you've been absent from class. I have noticed lately that you seem more down than the usual. A red flag for me that a person might need checking in is if they are doing something very different from how they are.
Like a suddenly quiet child becomes overly extroverted, and a suddenly extroverted child becomes overly quiet. You may have to think about that. Or a performing child suddenly starts to struggle. You may have to look at that. Ayan. Sabi nung question private, what if students don't get enough sleep dahil too much output and dinidemand ng courses and faculty? So yun yung part po of why we have to design wellness programs. And part of the wellness programs is task management and deadline management so that they're all within reason for a student to have a well-balanced life. Okay. So when do we refer students to a professional? Any concern that could benefit from additional support, they don't have to have a mental health problem for us to refer, because counseling, for example, or just checking in with the guidance counselor, it's nice, no, for normal life adjustment and for additional self-knowledge and just to vent. So you could refer if you feel that it's something that's very helpful. But if they have coping skills not sufficient for the problem, you may have to refer. And this is where our empathy has to be in place, because what is heavy for you may not be heavy for others. What's manageable for you may not be manageable for others. So say a death of a pet, for example, you could say, yan lang, but to refer, that affects the person very greatly. Maybe the pet is someone that they love, is part of the family. So we see how they are coping with the problem, regardless of whether that problem is big or small in our perspective, and see if they could help. If the stress, the anxiety, and the sadness is very, very intense or has been going on for a long time, I do suggest you could refer. For us, clinicians, depression is clinical. Part of the criteria, but not all part of the criteria, is if the low mood, the pessimism has been around for more days than not, for a period of 2 weeks, you may consider the person as a candidate for screening for depression. Impairment in functioning, they can't do their work, they don't relate well with others. You see suicidal behavior on Facebook, on a disclosure said to a friend. And suicidal behavior has varying degrees of severity and levels of seriousness. Some people have thoughts, but they have no intent. But others may have talked about plans, threats, and have made attempts. I just want to say, that in general, when we chat with our students about their concerns, it's confidential. But when life is possibly at risk, you may have to talk to the guidance person or a professional mental health consultant, whether it's time now to call the parents even without the child's consent, because the life is at risk. And a good plan really is for the school to also communicate with the external professional for guidance. If they have challenged reality testing, they're starting to have hallucinations, that they see things or hear things that are not there, they grossly misinterpret reality, they may be a candidate for more specialized services and other concerns. All right. At the end of the day, I think what's very important in terms of wellness in this difficult time is seeing the spirituality of it. I really don't discuss spirituality regularly on a mental health webinar in respect to the different places where participants are coming from, because some are not theists, some are of different religious affiliations, and I'm always careful about that. But spirituality can be faith-based. Studies have shown that the surrender to a loving God, to a higher power, for as long as your view of God is a loving person, that is very helpful for wellness. And in a crisis situation such as this, when there are things we cannot control, those things we cannot control, sometimes the best thing we can do is to surrender it to our faith, surrender it to a higher power, or even just a sense that there's meaning in the universe and there's a purpose at the end of the day. And maybe there's a purpose why all of this is happening. Some people, no, I have a 1-year-old. This allows me to spend more time with her. The pandemic, so maybe that's that. No, maybe it's a wake-up call for politicians, I hope. Let's see, no, so maybe there's a purpose for all of this, and looking at that and seeing it as a challenge for growth is very, very important. So there you go. That ends my on 1 hour and a half. Thank you for listening.